Welcome back to another episode of Perkins Pipes. For this, you'll see why this is so appropriate, but I've got this little meerschaum. I love this little meerschaum. Got this at the Briar and the Burley, an excellent brick and mortar pipe store in Bloomington, Indiana. But you'll see why this is so appropriate that I smoke a white pipe for this particular episode. So let's get this pipe lit and we'll get going. So once again, I've got some a wonderful comment from someone on the YouTube channel. As always, we invite you to subscribe. If you like the content of Perkins Pipes, please subscribe and invite your friends to do so as well. You can also find me over at Pipe Cottage Social on that app. And I especially like to hang out in the group called The Finer Things, which is a group that I started on that app. So I posted a video on YouTube and got a wonderful comment from a fellow over in England. So let me share that with you now. He says, "Good evening and hello from North Yorkshire. Love that pipe, buddy. I'm such a sucker for a good billiard." This is the video I had done on the Bing's billiard. Talked about the connection between it with the golf insignia on it. My dad, who liked to play golf. Connection with my mother, who liked Bing Crosby's music, and the fact that she had recently passed away. And he talked about that, and then he started talking about Bing Crosby's films. And as you can see there, I commented back on that and said that those films from Bing were so good. And then I mentioned somebody else from North Yorkshire. Mentioned the fact that the singer David Coverdale is from there. He's from a town called Saltburn by the Sea. And Jonathan says, yes, this is actually very, very close to where he lives. So in the Finer Things, I want to talk a little bit about music. And over time, we're going to talk about all kinds of music. We're going to talk about blues, we'll talk about jazz, we'll talk about rock and roll and country and classical and so forth. But since a fellow from North Yorkshire posted, Jonathan, so thank you, Jonathan, for that comment, it seemed only appropriate that we talk about that lad from North Yorkshire, David Coverdale. And the album that I'm holding here, as you can see, is Whitesnake's The Purple Album. And this is a special edition of that. And say, what in the world is going on here? So some of you may remember the great bands of the 60s. You think about Black Sabbath, you think about Led Zeppelin, Stones, of course, these great bands from the 60s and 70s. And Deep Purple started in 1968. And they released 3 albums, and very much that late 60s style, some really hints of early prog rock in there, some just really beautiful stuff. Really encourage you to check out the first 3 albums by Deep Purple. First one was called Shades of Deep Purple. In 1968, also released that year, the Book of Taliesin, their second album, and in the following year, the self-titled third album, Deep Purple. Then in 1970, came along what we call the Mark II lineup of Deep Purple. They changed some things, changed the singer, changed the bass player, and the legendary Ian Gillan was the singer then, Roger Glover, the bass player, replacing Nick Simper and Rod Evans. And so they recorded the classic Deep Purple in Rock, Deep Purple Fireball, than the immortal Machine Head, which of course has the song on there that every guitarist knows, "Smoke on the Water." Then Ian Gillan, lead singer, and he departed, and as did Roger Glover, and so they brought in Glenn Hughes on bass, who also sang some vocals, and a new lad from North Yorkshire, Saltburn-by-the-Sea, David Coverdale, and he recorded 3 albums with Deep Purple. Deep Purple Burn, 1973, then in 1974, I believe it was, maybe 75, Stormbringer, and then in 76, Come Taste the Band. And at that point, the band broke up. Of course, Deep Purple got back together, and that's a story for another time. After Deep Purple broke up, David Coverdale formed the band Whitesnake. Now, many of you may know that band as being an 80s hair band. You think of songs like Still of the Night, Here I Go Again, Is This Love? They were MTV darlings. Well, they had quite the discography before that. Their first album came out in 1978. It was an EP, and they had several albums through the 70s, early, mid-80s, and then finally broke big with the quintuple platinum self-titled album Whitesnake in 1987. Well, since David Coverdale started his musical career in 1973 with Deep Purple, he decided to release an album of what he called snaked up versions of songs from those 3 albums that he did with Deep Purple. And I'm reading off the back of the album here, but we've got Burn, Lay Down, Stay Down, Love Child, Holy Man, The Gypsy, Lady Double Dealer, Might Just Take Your Life, Coming Home, Stormbringer, Sail Away, You Keep On Moving, Lady Luck, the absolutely epic Mistreated, You Fool No One, and Soldier of Fortune. And then he released this album, I think, back in about 2015, I think it was. But for his 50th anniversary in music, yes, 2015. But for his 50th anniversary in music, he decided to re-release this album, Whitesnake, the Purple album, and remastered, remixed, beautiful gatefold album. There's the current lineup of the band. Whitesnake has also gone through many lineup changes. The one constant, of course, being David Coverdale himself. And this is just a gorgeous album. The inner album sleeve, there's 2 albums. The sleeves have his handwritten lyrics to some of the songs, and then the albums themselves are beautiful gold vinyl. Just absolutely gorgeous. Now, I don't know about you. My son is very much into vinyl. My son is a college student at Purdue University, and he's very much into vinyl. I've noticed a lot of young people have really gotten back into vinyl. Mentioning MTV earlier, MTV's very first video, you may recall, was Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. And many of us thought that once CDs came out that killed vinyl. And then, of course, in the digital age, streaming music thought that killed CDs, and certainly that vinyl was dead. And then all of a sudden, we've had this really great resurgence of vinyl albums. Artists releasing the material on vinyl, artists re-releasing material on vinyl, old things being reissued and so forth. And so I got to be honest, I at this point in my life, I really enjoy most of my music in the car. It's just the way it is. I listen to music on the way to school. I teach. We'll talk about that more in another episode. I'm a teacher. But most of the time I'm listening to music in the car, so therefore digital. So I don't really have as much vinyl anymore. Of course, I used to have vinyl. A lot of that's gone over the years. But my son collects vinyl, and he's totally into vinyl. And when he comes home, we'll sit in his room and we'll listen to vinyl together. And he likes all the really good stuff. He loves the Beatles. He loves Simon and Garfunkel and things like that. He's also into newer bands like Fleet Foxes and others. So I've started to pick up a few vinyls again. And this one I just had to get because, first of all, it's just a gorgeous cover. I just love that. And the gold vinyl and so forth. And so, of course, it's appropriate to smoke the white pipe for the band Whitesnake. Now, you may be saying, aren't you the guy who talks about Alexander Pope and the Iliad and Latin and all these really great things and the finer things? And how in the world are you doing an episode about Whitesnake and Deep Purple and rock and roll? I would argue that those also are among the finer things. If you give some of those classic bands a listen and really listen carefully to the music, there's some fabulous music. So these people were excellent musicians. And while the lyrics may not have been Shakespeare, yet many times they contained allusions to classical literature. Of course, we know that Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin had a fondness for Tolkien, and we see Lord of the Rings imagery in some of his lyrics. Even, I have to say, the Whitesnake logo. Now, they changed their logo for the 1987 album. And it's been this circle with the kind of twisted snakes there. But it says at the bottom, Serpanes albus, which is Latin for white snake. And Coverdale himself makes allusions to sometimes to mythology and other things, even Roman culture in one of his songs. Off the 1978 album, Whitesnake's album, Trouble. He's got a line about a woman who's perhaps not as virtuous as she should be. And he says, you make the sins of a Vestal virgin look nothing more than a roll in the hay. Well, you've got to know who the Vestal virgins were. This was something that goes back to ancient Rome and the priestesses of the Roman goddess Vesta, goddess of the hearth and home. So I thoroughly enjoy my rock and roll. I love blues-based, especially blues-based rock, which Whitesnake very much was. If you listen to any of the Whitesnake albums from 78 up to the last album, I think was 84. I think 84 was the last album before the big 87, like I say, the quintuple platinum hair metal MTV Darlings album. Any of those albums from 78 to 84, very bluesy. Very bluesy. In fact, there was a song on the 1980 album called Love Man. The 80 album is called Ready and Willing. And there's a song called Love Man, and this is straight up blues too. And of course, their signature song, many of you again know Still of the Night, but their signature song for years, the one that it was a big crowd favorite, and David Coverdale would often refer to the Whitesnake Choir, all of the people at the shows that would sing along, was a blues song by Bobby Blue Bland called Ain't No Love in the Heart of the City. And this was done on the original 1978 album, or 1978 album, EP, a 1978 EP titled Snakebite. And that just became a standard. And every time he would introduce her, or most of the times he would introduce it in concert, he would say, "We're going to do a blues tune for you now." So that music was very blues-based rock. I just absolutely love that stuff. Love straight up blues as well, and we'll certainly talk about that on another episode. So I'm curious. Leave me a note in the comments to this video. Again, we'd love to have you hit subscribe as well. But leave me a note. What are some of the classic rock bands that you really enjoy? You enjoy any Deep Purple? Are you a Deep Purple fan, perhaps? What about Led Zeppelin? Or Sabbath, or any of those? And do we have any Whitesnake fans out there? So we'd love to hear from you. So as Malcolm Guite always says, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Or as I would say in Latin, parva ago, ut tandem nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.
There was a man who walked the earth, diesel and dust, feeding